welcome back inside Theater 43, part 2 of the UCS Millennium Falcon build. What a difference a couple days makes. Almost a week or so, a week and a half since part 1 that was released, and lots of great feedback. Thank you so much for all your messages and comments, and people that know me well, see me on the street or at work or whatever, and have asked, wow, it looks cool, or what's happening next. All those updates will be coming as we go on all the social medias, Facebook and Instagram. Probably the best ones to see pictures and videos and just quick little things of what we're doing. But these videos will be the detail aspects of what we're doing. Real quick, some housekeeping. A big announcement while we were in between parts 1 and 2 from LEGO was for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission. They were announcing a lunar module lander, and the lander has landed at Theater 43. So it's here, and we'll be getting to that in time. Priority though is the Falcon. A ton of stuff has happened in the last week, like I said. If you recall, let's go right back to part 1 for a quick second. We had the superstructure. So just the basic kind of foundation was what we finished with. An empty pods kind of thing. You'll see some pictures as we go. But what's happened then is we've done bags 2 through 6 of a 17-bag build. And what has basically transpired is we now have a full shape. We kind of get an idea of the length and width of this thing, and she's going to be big. It's going to be a big one. Bag 2 was pretty primitive. We started with the landing gear. I will try and lift this thing up as much as I can. It's getting heavy. It's getting tricky. So it's some really gorgeous landing gear, lots of detail, and really nicely designed pieces down there. That's what Bag 2 got us. The landing gear, which also gave us a proper foundation. If you remember from part 1, it was tippy, it was rickety. Getting some of the finer pieces on in the first chunk of the build was tough. We have that nice foundation now. So we're starting to get a sense of... Sorry, I'm making some notes as I go. If I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. Starting to getting a sense of the detail of this thing and how much work and design has gone into it. Lots and lots and lots of small parts. If you recall, 8,000 pieces. It's like 7,900 something that makes up this build. And that's all in the finesse. The little nuances that show off all the detail, the damage, the things, the additions that Han Solo made. And Charlotte's here. I'm not sure if you can see her. My dog, for those that don't know. Lots of cool stuff. And Bag 2 is a lot of design with the feet, showing off just how nicely they've finished it. The finishing pieces, lots of smooth edges. On the smaller version of the Falcon, it's just kind of a couple pieces mashed together to give you a landing gear, which looks okay. This is better. It looks like a model. It's properly built. There's some hinging. It looks like hydraulics. Really cool stuff there. The triangular stuff on the feet, like I said, just nice finishing edges, smooth finish on the bottom. You'll see a lot of that as you get into this, with everywhere, in some of the rooms and some of the edges, the perimeter, the exterior, it's all there. When we got into the landing gear in Bag 2, it was the first taste, and so far the only taste, of repetition, and the only time that we've seen that. But it was a fun way. I mean, sometimes that's kind of comforting, or it's an easier break. So unfortunately the repetition and the easier stuff came early, and we'll get into that later. But that was the only time we saw that. The rest of it got very complex and very unique. The landing gear basically made up Bag 2. That was about it. That was all. There was a couple things that got added inside, but nothing really crazy. On Bag 3, we had small parts aplenty. Lots and lots of details. The Bag 3 basically began building the inner modules. So on top, you can see a couple different rooms, and as it is right now, we have an empty space. We have the games room, some space for some hidden features, which I'll get into, and we also got the first taste of minifigures. So the first couple that we looked at were Porgs. We got to build a couple Porgs, and that was really, really cool. This is probably one of the favorite minifigures I own now. Maybe that's lame, I don't know, but I really got a kick out of having the Porgs in my LEGO collection. We also saw C-3PO and Chewbacca. Let me just make sure I got that right. And if I recall correctly, I now have my very first C-3PO minifigure, which I have a pretty substantial Star Wars collection, and you've always seen behind me on the Brick Builds walls. But now I have a C-3PO, and that's pretty cool. Might be my only one, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure. As we get away from the repetition, and we get into the bag from Bag 2, we get into Bag 3, you start to see the rooms. Each room kind of has its own specific thing going on, and I have a feeling more stuff will get added to some of the more emptier spaces at this point. But with Bag 3, we saw really cool things. One of them was, if you remember from the movies, the drop-down blaster that's on the mechanical arm. That comes down from a releasable trapdoor or sliding door. The machine or the gun drops down. I thought that was really neat. Just a nice little touch to the fans, and if you know the movies well, the features that the Falcon has, you have a lot of that in this build. What was really neat about it as I was building is I wasn't sure what it was going to be. I knew it was a sliding door, and that's kind of cool. But what happens is there's a nice little rubber tab that's hanging down underneath, and it acts as a friction device. So as you slide the door open, you have the gun drop down, but the friction on the door is just not flopping around back and forth. It's held up by this really neat rubber. It almost looks like a figure 8, and it's a nice soft rubber. You just add it to an elbow bend, a 90-degree piece that's held in by some of that, hole and rod mechanic stuff. It's just a neat little... I've never seen that before in any LEGO build. Now, I don't know if that's a new thing LEGO's doing. They're adding it to some more kits, but it's the first time I've seen it. I thought it was really, really neat. Really elaborate technical stuff. A more complicated approach than I've ever seen. Just getting some of these pieces in and finessed and in the right spot was a bit of a challenge. Still more of the... it's all held in place by the multi-stage pins, as I like to call them. They fit into the superstructure, the holes of the superstructure, and that's all that's holding some of these areas in. It was the first stickers we saw as we got into some of the games rooms with the backs of the chairs and some of the control panels. We finally got into some of the stickers. Now, I'm only about a third of the way into this build, and most of the stickers are gone. So that's reassuring. For those of you like me who hate stickers in LEGO, we're almost through them. But they do add a nice little touch, especially the rooms that will show if you want to stage minifigures in them or you want to show them off to people when you unveil this thing. It's a nice little addition. It adds a bit of detail. What they've done with some of the hallways, we can't fit everything into this build, of course, but what they've done is they've made the stickers as like an optical illusion. So you have them in the spaces, the rooms if you call them, the pods as I call them, and it just looks like there's a hallway through the doorways. The doorways are done in such an excellent, beautiful way with angled pieces, and the colors are perfect. It looks just like we know it from the movie, but as you look into that doorway, there's a sticker that shows you the hallways of the Millennium Falcon, because there's just not enough space, or this thing would be even bigger than it is right now. We're starting to see more things from the film that give it a little more of a personal touch. There's a blast helmet. There's things on the floor, like grating on the floor. There's also a little, and the one pod in the back, where we have the hyperdrive, the engine itself in the one corner. We see a little trap door. We know that the Falcon was used for smuggling. They've included just a little flip-out trap door that can be used to hide anything. But I just like it's a detail that to the fan, that's really, really cool. We started to build up in Bag 3 the front nose panel, and underneath that was really tough. There was a underneath the front of the build, where the front landing gear attached, that all had to be attached, inverted, if we want to call it that. And where they mounted it and how they mounted it was really, really, really tricky. So that took some time, and when you're getting into it, this is one of these builds where you need some patience, not just for the piece count and all the little details, but how things mount. There's a reason I now realize that I was saying how wonderful it was to have a giant instruction manual, or the build instructions. But there's a reason. The large print is very, very helpful when you're getting some of these larger pieces together with tiny little mount sections. You need to have that kind of reference. I'm going to move 3PO here before I knock him over. And the porg. The front end was a bit of a challenge, getting that all together. There's things that flip out and some of the reference pieces. The shape and scale was tough in that once you start adding some of these smaller pieces, it's almost becoming fragile. You have to be very careful on where you're grabbing, how you're lifting. I was pinching things off, and things were flying and bending the wrong way, or if you set it down on top of something, things would kind of pop off. Got to be very, very careful of that. Soft hands was kind of how I was approaching that. Which got us into Bag 4. A couple days later, I was into Bag 4. More minifigures at the start of each bag, which was kind of neat. Han and Leia arrived, and Han and Leia are great. They're obviously Han and Leia from Empire Strikes Back. Great hair on both of the minifigures, and they even have the inverted face masks, so that the heads of the minifigures are swappable. They have the gas masks on from when they're inside the worm on the meteor, and on the other side they're both smiling and happy, and Han's looking tough, and great minifigures. Han comes with his blaster. It's really cool. Another pod came from Bag 4. More tunnels, the trapdoor in the back, the hyperdrive in the corner. That was really, really nice. Some nice stuff going on there. A couple more stickers, but nothing crazy. Again, I love the tunnels. They were just so well done. A pain in the butt to build. Lots of small pieces, and things were flipped upside down and reversing the way you're mounting pieces together. But when you finally get them installed, God, does it look good. It's just a nice touch that they've put on all of these little pod rooms, whatever you want to call them, the living quarters of the Falcon. There's a trapdoor in the back, which I mentioned. I just thought that was really, really neat. And the hyperdrive design was cool. It was misleading. There was a spot in the instructions that got a little tricky. That was, it was suggesting things go a certain way, and when you try to approach it from that way, it didn't quite work. I was able to get it to fit, and everything landed nicely, and I was able to proceed, but it took a while and a couple different tries. So take your time going through these stages, these interior stages. Make sure you're following the instructions, and you might have to get a little creative. Not go off book, but you might have to try a couple different approaches before you realize what they're going for. Some of the pages aren't quite clear, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We now, at the end of the Bag 4, we realize there's 4 pods, or there's 4 rooms for the interior living area that are installed inside the main structure. One room right now is still empty at the end of this stage, and I'm not quite sure what it's for yet. I'm sure we'll get to there eventually, but we'll find out. And we're starting to see the exterior at the end of Bag 4. We were getting more pieces on top, some of these little like mechanical things like air vents and just these rods and who knows what else, just to add to that complexity of what's going on with all of those pieces. They're not just random. They do make it look more real, legitimate, whatever the term might be. Bag 5 of our 6-bag build, or this section of the build anyway. We're starting to see, let me just go through my notes again, the exterior is when it got super real. The engine bells went on, the blue parts across the back. So Bag 5 started to get us a little more decorative, a little more detail in the exterior of the thing. The big notable one was the rear end, the engine bell, if you want to call it that, or the tubing that showed off the hyperdrive, that blue-white light. They've done it with these blue tubes. If you have an older version of the Falcon, the smaller ones, the toy-size ones I like to call them, they used 1 or 2 of these tubes. The UCS has 6, so there's 6 of these pipes that show off the rear engine of the Falcon. It's just a nice approach. They put that grating. The grating I haven't seen since I was a kid. There was a brown version of it that was used as ladders on the old pirate sets, if you remember from like mid to early 90s in the old pirate sets in the castles. That's where I used to see those. So a nice innovation on some of their older parts that they've got in their arsenal at LEGO, just to add to that detail. The corner elbows of these things had a neat design. You were basically building 2 pieces that connected together to form an elbow. And then they had this reinforced corner design to make sure nothing was going to buckle or snap on you, which I thought was brilliant. And it's just simple trussing. If you're an engineering specialist or you're into construction, you're going to dig this build because there's a lot of reinforcement just based on the size and the weight. There are these corner pieces with the yellow rods and the red mounting pieces, and they're just using that Technic 90-degree elbow bend coming together to basically form like a triangle or a 90-degree angle, and then they cross it on a 45 with these great yellow and red rods and the red mounting pieces. Really, really clever, very, very useful. I mean, again, super durable. I could probably lift the whole thing from here. I really don't want to because there's a lot of flex going on, but it wouldn't break. As we got to the end of Bag 5, and I finished it, we could start to see what it was looking like, and in terms of the shape. Still didn't have the nose cones on the end, on the front end, but the back end and the center being complete was starting to come together. But it was getting heavier, harder to hold, and and still more to come. I don't know what it's going to be like when we get this thing done, what that's going to feel like. Bag 6 was the end of the build. The full shape basically completed at that. What happened again, more of that elbow, that 45 and 90 degree reinforcement, but mirror image, a bit of repetition in terms of the frame of the nose pieces, but all the exterior details were different. They're not total mirrors. They have their own nuances, their own little kind of accents, I guess is the word I'm looking for here, on the outside. And I like to think of them as, I mean, the true fan knows that the Millennium Falcon was once one thing, and then once Solo got a hold of it, modified it in his own vision. And that's kind of what we're seeing, is some of these random pieces on the outside that make up the complexity of the Falcon's exterior. The nose pieces were made up of a lot of small parts. So when I pulled the Bag 6 bags out, it didn't look like much. I thought, oh, this isn't going to take very long. And that was a good night, like couple hours, just completing these nose cones. And the way they mounted together, again, very standard, just standard pin connection, I guess, again, into the holes of the superstructure. And then there's some neat reinforcement stuff going on right in the middle. Not mounted to anything, not secured to anything, but there is an like a vertical gravity-based section where the piece is held to the superstructure just so it's not going to fall or flip around, just supporting the weight of holding the front end around. There's a bit of flex in the front as it stands right now. I'm not sure if once we start to add coverings and more detail there, if that'll secure itself a little bit more. But for now, I mean, still very rigid, very very strong, and all put together really, really wonderfully. Yeah, I mean, this is part 2. Superstructure's done. We have a shape. It's all in front of me, and it was a ton of work, a lot of pieces. I'd say we're about a third of the way there. I'm looking forward to the next parts. Going through the bags and getting a little nosy, trying to give myself a bit of a spoiler. From here on out, it looks like just a lot of small pieces. Putting all the coverings together, starting to finish all those little decorative parts. And that's the stuff that, I mean, the true Lego builders dig, right? That's why we do this. It's going to be amazing. It's huge. We'll talk about it later, where it's going to live. It's going to look amazing. I'm so excited. I hope you guys are too. Listen, keep the feedback coming. If there's any questions you have, or if there's, you just want to know when the next one's coming, don't be afraid to let me know. A lot of people ask me, what's next? When's it coming out? When are you going to be done? I love the feedback, and I love talking to people about this. I'm glad everyone's excited about this build, because I sure am. And don't be afraid to let me know. All the social medias, send us a tweet or a comment or a message, and I'll definitely get back to you. And if there's anything else you want to see in brick builds, by all means, let me know. I'm gonna keep building, and I hope you guys do too. The next section, we'll be doing bags 7 to 12 or something like that, and there's a lot more that'll get added. Hopefully we'll start to see a cockpit form and all those features we love, the turret guns and things like that. We're starting to see a little bit of that here, but there's more to come. I think that's more towards the end of the build, but exciting stuff for sure. Don't be afraid to keep in touch with us, and do not forget to keep building. I will be back very, very soon here on Brick Builds at Theater 43. Stay good, and I will talk to you very, very soon.